countdown music.
Hey, y'all, what's happening? I forgot. It's been a minute, so I actually forgot how the countdown worked, and I forgot that I didn't let it do the 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. But you know what? Don't get too comfortable and get too used to that countdown. No, that countdown got another 2 weeks, maybe. If that. I am sipping hot tea tonight, and I am. While I have no intention of compromising the read tonight, I do want to be really careful because, as some of you may know, and others of you are going to be finding out for the first time, I will be doing a live audition tomorrow for Audible. They contacted me a couple of weeks ago. First, they were like, hey, send us a couple of samples. And so I was like, if only I had samples of me reading something aloud, gee whiz. But then I remembered, like, I had a whole archive of every show. So I pulled a couple of my favorites and sent those, and then said, hey, you should audition for us live because that's the next step. And I said, that sounds exciting. I would very much like to do that. And so tomorrow I'll be doing that thing, which means tonight, again, while I have no intention of compromising the read, I might be a little bit careful with how I render the voices, as I need to have one tomorrow. So that's a thing that's happening in my world. How y'all doing? What's going on in your respective worlds? I ask questions like that, but I can't see the comments yet. So let's remedy that. All right. I see Kamisha's here. I see Gwen is upset about the countdown. Thank you so much, Joker. I'm super proud of me too. And thank you, Alicia. I appreciate it. So listen, y'all. Tonight we are going to be reading from. I love to show the covers. Now, for those of you who are in the pre-read, you understand my frustration. Look at this. Okay, look at this and tell me that this looks all flowery and delightful. It's like, oh, skin folk stories, and it's so wonderful. And we're gonna read it. And then she rips out the intestines. So that's happening. I see most of you all are watching on Facebook. I do want to remind you that you can now watch on YouTube. And one of the exciting things about watching on YouTube, because you see Erica Goodman on YouTube, is excited to be watching on YouTube. One of the exciting things about watching it on YouTube is they will stay there, because coming very quickly, I will be removing all of the Facebook Live archives, editing those and putting those on the YouTube channel. The YouTube channel is really where you need to be. I still love, for the lives, if you're going to watch it live, this is the place to be. Facebook is definitely the place to be. You get more conversation here. But if you want to go back and watch them, say, anytime after the next day, starting pretty soon, the only option for that is going to be YouTube. That is the plan, because we want to be able to expand past and beyond Facebook, because Facebook don't run us. But let's begin with tonight's story. Tonight's first story is A Habit of Waste by Nalo Hopkinson, from her book Skinfolk. Now, this begins with a poem, so let's start here. These are the latitudes of ex-colonized, of degradation still unmollified, imported messengers, styles in art, second-hand substance of the spirit, the habit of waste, mayhem committed on the personality, and everywhere the wrecked or scuttled mind. Scholars more brilliant than I could hope to be advised that if I valued poetry, I should eschew all sociology. Slade Hopkinson, from The Mad Woman of Papine, 2 cartoons with captions. I was nodding off on the streetcar home from work when I saw the woman getting on. She was wearing the body I used to have. The shock woke me right up. It was my original. The body I had replaced 2 years before, same full, tardy-looking lips, same fat thighs rubbing together with every step, same outsized ass, same narrow torso that seemed grafted onto a lower body a good 3 sizes bigger, as though God had glued leftover parts together. On my pay, I'd have to save for 5 years before I could afford the switch. When I ordered the catalog from MediPerfection, I pored over it for a month, drooling at the different options. Aero Slim Cindy's had long legs, supermodel quality. Indira's came with creamy brown skin, falls of straight dark hair and curvaceous bodies, exotic grace. I finally chose one of the Dianas, with their lithe muscles and small, firm breasts, boyish beauty. They downloaded me into her as soon as I could get the time off work. I was back on the job in 4 days, although my fine muscle control was a little shaky. And now, here was someone wearing my old cast-off. She must have been in a bad accident. Too bad for the body to be salvaged if she couldn't afford cloning. The doctors would have just downloaded her brain into any donated car. Mine, for instance. Poor thing, I thought. I wonder how she's handling that chafing problem. It used to drive me mad in the summer. I watched her put her ticket in the box. The driver gave her a melting smile. What did he see to grin at? I studied my former body carefully as it made its way down the center of the streetcar. I hated what she'd done to the hair. Let it go natural, for Christ's sake, sectioned it off and coiled black thread tightly each around each section, with a puff of hair on the end of every stalk. Man, I hated that back to Africa nostalgia shit. She looked like a Dr. Seuss character. There's no excuse for that nappy-headed nonsense. She had a lot of nerve, too, wrapping that behind in a flower print sarong miniskirt, sort of like making your ass into a billboard. When it was my body, I always covered its butt in long skirts or loose pants. Her skirt was so short I could see the edges of the bike shorts peeking out below it. Well, that's one way to deal with the chafing. Strange, though. On her, the little peak of black shorts looked stylish and sexy all at once. Far from looking graceless, her high round bottom twitched confidently with each step, giving her a proud sexiness that I never had. Her upper body was sheathed in a white sleeveless t-shirt. White! Such a plain color. To tell the truth, though, the clingy material emphasized her tiny waist, and the white looked really good against her dark skin. Had my old skin always had that glow to it? Such firm, strong arms. All the seats on the streetcar were taken. Good. Let the bitch stand. I hoped my fallen arches were giving her hell. Home at last, I stripped off and headed straight for the mirror. The boyish body was still slim, thighs still thin, tiny, perfect apple breasts still perky. I presented my behind to the mirror. A little flabby, perhaps. I wasn't sure. I turned around again, got up close to the mirror so that I could inspect my face. Did my skin have that glow my old bodies had? And weren't those the beginning of crow's feet around my eyes? Shit. White people age so quickly. I spent the evening sprawled on the sofa, watching reruns and eating pork and beans straight from the can. That afternoon at work, old man Morris came in for the usual. I stacked his order on the counter between us and keyed the contents into the computer. It bleeped at me. This selection does not meet the customer's dietary requirements. As if I didn't know that. I tried to talk him into beefing up the carbs and beta carotene. All right then, I said heartily. What else will you have today? Some of that creamed corn? We just got a big batch of tins in. I bet you'd love some of that, eh? I always sound so artificial, but I couldn't help it. The food bank customers made me uncomfortable. Eleanor didn't react that way, though. She was so at ease in the job. Cheerful, dispensing cans of tuna with an easy goodwill. She always chattered away to the clients, knew them all by name. No thanks, dear, Mr. Morris replied with his polite smile. I could never stomach the tinned vegetables. When I can, I eat them fresh, you know? Yes, Cynthia, Eleanor teased. You know that Mr. Morris hates canned veggies. Too much like baby food, eh, Mr. Morris? Always the same cute banter between those two. He'd flattened out his Caribbean accent for the benefit of us two white girls. I couldn't place which island he was from. I sighed and overrode the computer's objection. Eleanor and Old Man Morris grinned at each other while I picked up his weekend ration. Fresh, right? When could a poor old man ever afford fresh stuff? I couldn't imagine what his diet was like. He always asked us for the same things: soup mix, powdered milk, and cans of beans. We tried to give him his nutritional quota, but he politely refused offers of creamed corn or canned tuna. I was sure he was always constipated. His problem, though. I bet my parents could tell me where in the Caribbean he was from. Give them an inkling that someone was from back home, and they'd be on him like a dirty shirt, badgering him with questions. Which island you from? How long you been here in Canada? Family live here? When last you go back home? Old Man Morris signed for his order and left. One of the volunteers would deliver it later that evening. I watched him walk away. He looked to be in his late 60s, but he was probably younger. Hard life wears a person down. Tallish, with a brown, wrinkled face and tightly curled salt and pepper hair. He had a strong, upright walk for someone in his circumstances. Even in summer, I had never seen him without that old tweed jacket, its pockets stuffed to bursting with God knew what type of scavenge, half-smoked cigarette butts that people had dropped on the street, I supposed, and pop cans he would return for the deposit money. At least he seemed clean. I went down to shipping to check on a big donation of food we received from a nearby supermarket. Someone was sure to have made a mistake sorting the cans. Someone always did. My parents had been beside themselves when they found out I'd switched bodies. I guess it wasn't very diplomatic of me showing up without warning on their suburban doorstep, this white woman with her floopy blonde hair claiming to be their daughter. I'd made sure that my new body would have the same vocal range as the old one, so when my mom and dad heard my voice coming out of a stranger's body, they flipped. Didn't even want to let me in the door at first. Made me pass my new ID and the doctor's certificate through the letter slot. "Mom, give me a break," I yelled. "I told you last year that I was thinking about doing this." "But Sin, that ain't even look like you." My mother's voice was close to a shriek. Her next words were for my dad. "What the child want to go and do this kind of stupidness for? Nothing ain't wrong with the way she look." A giggled response from my father. "True, she had a way about to remain on. She," I just remember what he said. "True, she behind had a way to remain in a room long after she leave, but she get that from you, sweetheart. You know how much I love that behind." He aimed that dig from my ears. I just knew it. I'd had enough. "So are the two of you going to let me in or what?" I hated it when they carried on the way they were doing. All that drama. And I really wish they'd drop the banana boat accents. They'd come to Canada 5 years before I was even born, for Christ's sake. I was now 28. They did finally open the door, and after that, they just had to get used to the new me. I wondered if I should start saving for another switch. It's really a rich people's thing. I couldn't afford to keep doing it every few years like some kind of vid queen. Shit. "What's griping you?" Eleanor asked after I chewed out one of the volunteers for some little mistake. "You've been cranky for days now." Damn. "Sorry. I know I've been bitchy. I've been really down, you know? No real reason. I just don't feel like myself." "Yeah, well," Eleanor was used to my moodiness. "I guess it is Thanksgiving weekend. People always get a little edgy around the holidays. Maybe you need a change. Tell you what, why don't you deliver Old Man Morris's ration? Make sure he's okay for the weekend." "Morris? You want me to go to where he lives?" I couldn't imagine anything less appealing. "Where is that anyway? In a park or something?" Eleanor frowned at that. "So, even if he does, so what? You need to get over yourself, girl." I didn't say anything, just thought my peevishness at her. She strode over to the terminal at her desk, punched in Mr. Morris's name, handed me the printout. "Just go over to this address and take him his ration. Chat with him a little bit. This might be a lonely weekend for him. And keep the car till Tuesday. We won't be needing it." Mr. Morris lived on the creepy side of Sherborne. I had to slow the car down to dodge the first wave of drunken suits lurching out of the strip club on their boozy way home after the usual Friday afternoon 3-hour liquid lunch. I stared at the story-high poster that covered one outside wall of the strip club. I hope to God they'd use a fish-dyed lens to make the babe's boobs look like that. Those couldn't be natural. Shit, shouldn't have slowed down. One of the prostitutes on the corner began to twitch her way over to the car, bending so low she could see inside, giving a flash of her tits in the bargain. Hey, darling, you want to go out? I can swing Leslie. I floored it out of there. Searching for the street helped to keep my mind off some of the more theatrical sights of Cabbagetown West on a Friday evening. I didn't know that the police could conduct a full strip search over the hood of the car, right out in the open. The next street was Old Man Morris's. Tenement row houses slumped along one side of the short street, marked by sagging roofs and knocked out steps. There were rotting piles of garbage in front of many of the houses. I thought I could hear the flies buzzing from where I was. The smell was like clotted carrion. A few people hung out on dilapidated porches just staring. 2 guys hunched into denim jackets stopped talking as I drove by. A dirty, greasy-haired kid was riding a bicycle up and down the sidewalk, dodging the garbage. The bike was too small for him and it had no seat. He stood on the pedals and pumped them furiously. Mr. Morris lived in an ancient apartment building on the other side of the street. I had to double park in front. I hauled the dolly out of the trunk and loaded Mr. Morrison's boxes onto it. I activated the car screamer alarm and headed into the building, praying that no weirdness would go down on the street before I could make it inside. Thank God he answered the buzzer right away. Mr. Morris, it's Cynthia from the food bank. The party going on in the lobby was only a few gropes away from becoming an orgy. The threesome writhing and sighing on the couch ignored me. 2 men, 1 woman. I stepped over a pungent yellow liquid that was beetling its way down the leg of the bench, creeping through the cracks in the tile floor. I hoped it was just booze. I took the elevator up to the 6th floor. The dingy, musty corridor walls were dark gray, peeling in places to reveal bilious pink underneath. It was probably a blessing that there was so much dirt ground into the balding carpet. What I could glimpse of the original design made me queasy. Someone was frying spam for dinner. Canned horse's cock, my dad called it. I found Mr. Morris's door and knocked. Inside, I could hear the sound of locks turning and the curt quack of an alarm being deactivated. Mr. Morris opened up the door and let me in. Come in quick, child, he said, wiping his hands on a dirty towel. I can't let the pot boil over. Don't Jake does deliver my goods? He bustled into a room I guessed was the kitchen. I wheeled the dolly inside. Eleanor sent Jake home early today, Mr. Morris. Holiday treat. He chuckled. That young lady is so thoughtful, It ain't half plenty. That young lady is so thoughtful, It ain't half plenty of people like she anymore. I took a quick glance around the little apartment. It was dark in there. The only light was from in the kitchen and 4 or 5 candles stuck in pop bottles on the living room windowsill. The living room held 1 small rump-sprung couch, 2 aluminum chairs, and a tiny card table. The gaudy flower print cloth that barely covered the table was faded from years of being ironed. I was surprised. The place was spotless, if a little shabby. I perched on the edge of the love seat. His head poked around the corner. Yes, he said, that's right. Sit down on the settee and rest yourself. Settee. We. In his own home, he spoke in a more natural accent. You from Trinidad, Mr. Morris? His face crinkled into an astonished grin. Yes, Doodoo. How you know that? That's where my parents are from. They talk just like you. You was from Trinidad? He asked delightedly. It's true Trini people come in all colors, but with that accent, I really take you for a Canadian born and bred. I hated explaining this, but I guess I'd ask for it, letting him know something about my life. I was born here, but my parents are black, and so was I. but I've had a body switch. A bemused expression came over his face. He stepped into the living room to take a closer look at me. For true? I hear about people doing this thing, but I don't think I ever meet nobody who make the switch. You mean to tell me you changed from a black woman body into this one? Lord, the things you young people does do for fashion, eh? I stood up and plastered a smile on my face. Well, you got your weekend ration, Mr. Morris. Just wanted to be sure you wouldn't go hungry on Thanksgiving, okay? He looked pensively at the freeze-dried turkey dinner and the cans of creamed corn. I'd made sure to put them in his ration this time. Thanks, Doo-Doo. True, I ain't got to be hungry, but what, Mr. Morris? Well, I don't like to eat alone. My wife passed away 10 years now, but you know, I does still miss she sometimes. You going by your mommy and daddy for Thanksgiving? The question caught me off guard. Yes, I'm going to see them on Sunday, but you're not doing anything tonight. Well, a movie, maybe, something like that. He gave me a sweet, wheedling smile. You want to have an early Thanksgiving with an old man from back home? I'm not from back home, I almost said. The hope on his face was more than I could stand. Well, I'm making a nice dinner, he pleaded. Eleanor would stay and keep the old man company for a few minutes, if it were her. I sat back down. Mr. Morris's grin was incandescent. You going to stay? All right, Doo-Doo. Dinner almost finished, you hear? Just pile up the ration out the way for me. He bustled back into the kitchen. I could hear humming, pots and pans clattering, water running. I packed the food up against one wall, a running argument playing in my head the whole time. Why was I doing this? I'd driven our pathetic excuse for a company car through the most dangerous part of town, just begging for a baseball bat through the window, and all to have dinner with an old bum. What would he serve anyway? Peanut butter and crackers? I knew the shit that man ate. I'd given it to him myself every Friday at the food bank. And what if he pulled some kind of sleazy, toothless come on? The police would say I asked for it. A wonderful smell began to waft from the kitchen. Some kind of roasting meat with spices. Whatever Mr. Morris was cooking, he couldn't have done it on food bank rations. You need a hand, Mr. Morris? Not in here, darling. I'm nearly ready. Just sit yourself down at the table and I go bring dinner out. I'm going to freeze all the extra, but now I have a guest to share it with. He brought out the main course, arms straining under the weight of the platter. My mouth fell open. It was just the beginning. He loaded the table with plate after plate of food, roasted chicken with giblet stuffing, rich creamy gravy, tossed salad with exotic greens, huge mounds of mashed potatoes. Sorry, I got hungry. Huge mounds of mashed potatoes, some kind of fruit preserve. He refused to answer my questions. I go tell you all about it after, Doo-Doo. Now it's time to eat. It certainly was. I was so busy trying to figure out if he could have turned food bank rations. I was so busy trying to figure out if he could have turned food bank rations into this feast that I forgot all about calories and my daily allowable grams of fat. I just ate. After the meal, though, curiosity kicked in again. So, Mr. Morris, tell me the truth. You snowing the food bank? Making some money on the side? I grinned at him. He wouldn't be the first one to run a scam like that, working for cash so that he could still claim welfare. No, Doo-Doo. He gave me a mischievous smile. I see how it looked that way to you, but this meal cost me next to nothing. You just have to know where to, procure your food. That is all. You see this fancy salad? He pointed to a few frilly purple leaves that were all that remained of the salad. You know what that is? Yeah, flour and kale. Rich cash. Mr. Morris laughed. Yes, but I bet you see it somewhere else besides the grocery store. I frowned, trying to think what he meant. He went on. You know the Dominion Bank, the big one at Bathurst and Queen. I nodded, still mystified. His smile got even broader. You ever look at the plants they use to decorate on the front? I almost spat my salad out. Ornamental cabbage? We're eating ornamental cabbage that you stole from the front of a building? His rich laugh filled the tiny room. Not ornamental cabbage, darling. Flowering kale. And I figure I ain't really stealing it. I recycling it. They just pull it up all and throw it away when the weather turns cold. All that food. It does taste nice on a Sunday morning, frying up with a piece of saltfish and some small leaf thyme. I does grow the herb on the windowsill in the sun. Salted cod and cabbage, flavored with French thyme and hot pepper. My mother made that on Sunday mornings too, with big fried flour dumplings on the side and huge mugs of cocoa. Not the cocoa powder from the tin either. She brought the raw chocolate in chestnut-sized lumps from the Jamaican store and grated it into the boiling water with vanilla, cinnamon, and condensed milk. Sitting in Mr. Morris's living room, even with the remains of dinner on the table, I could almost smell that pure chocolate aroma, full of fat too. I didn't let my mom serve it to me anymore when I visited. I'd spent too much money on my tight little butt. Still, I didn't believe what old man Morris was telling me. So, you mean to say that you just take stuff from the street? Yes. What about the chicken? He laughed. Chicken? Doodle. You ever see a chicken with 4 drumstick? That is a wild rabbit I catch myself and bring home. Are you crazy? Do you even know what's in wild food? What kind of diseases it might carry? Why didn't you tell me that that's what we were eating? But he was so pleased with himself, he didn't seem to notice how upset I was. Nah, don't worry about diseases, darling. I've been eating like this for 5-6 years now, and I healthy like hog. The doctor say he never see a 74-year-old man in such good shape. He's 74? He does look pretty damn good for such an old man. I'm still not convinced, though. Mr. Morris, this is nuts. You just can't go around helping yourself to leaves off the trees and people's ornamental plants and killing things and eating them. Besides, how do you catch a wild rabbit anyway? Well, that's the sweet part. He jumped up from his chair, started rummaging around in the pockets of his old tweed jacket that was hanging in the hallway. He came back to the table, clutching a fistful of small rocks and brandishing a thick, Y-shaped twig with a loose rubber strap attached. So that's what he kept in those pockets. Whatever it was. This is a slingshot. When I was a small boy back home, I was aces with one of these. He stretched the rubber snap tight with one hand, aimed the slingshot at one of his potted plants, and pretended to let off a shot. Play! Like so. Me and the boys them used to practice shooting at all old tin cannon thing, but I was the best. One time, I catch a coral snake in my mother kitchen and I send one boulder stone straight through its eye with me first shot. He chuckled. The stone break the window too, but me mother was only too glad that I killed the poison snake. Well, Doo-doo, I does take me slingshot down into the ravine, and sometimes I get lucky and catch something. I was horrified. You mean you used that thing to kill a rabbit and we just ate it? Mr. Morris's face finally got serious. He sat back down at the table. You must understand, Cynthia. I, as a poor man, me and my Rita, we work hard when we come to this country, and we managed to buy this little apartment. But when the last depression hit I get laid off at the car plant. After that, I couldn't find no more work again. I was already past 50 years old. Nobody would hire me. We get by on Rita nurse work until she retire. And then hard times catch we ass. My Rita was a wonderful woman, girl. She'd take half a pound of minced beef and 2 potatoes and make a meal that have you feeling like you never taste food before. She used to tell me, never mind, Johnny. So long as I have a little meat to put in this cook pot, we're not gonna starve. Then them find out Rita have cancer. She only live a few months after that. getting weaker till she wasted away and gone. Lord, child, I thought my heart would have break. I did wish to dead too. That first year after Rita passed away, I couldn't tell you how I get by. I don't even remember all of it. I let the place get dirty. And I was eating any old caca from the corner store, not even self going to the grocery. When I get the letter from the government telling me that them cutting off Rita pension, I didn't know what to do. My one little pension wasn't going to support me. I put on my coat and went outside, heading for the train tracks to throw myself down. It's must God did make me walk through that park. What happened? I see an old woman sitting on a bench, wearing a tear-up coat and two different one-side boots. She's feeding stale bread to the pigeons and smiling at them. That old lady, when she rip up clothes, could still find something to make she happy. I went back home and things start to look up a little bit from then. Pride nearly make me starve myself before I find myself inside the food bank to beg some bread. It's not begging, Mr. Morris. I know, Doo-Doo, but in my place, I sure you would have feel the same way. And two, besides, even though I was eating steady from the food bank, I wasn't eating good, you know. You can't live all your days on tuna fish and tin peas. I thought of all the tins of tuna I had just brought him. I felt myself blushing. 2 years in this body, and I still wasn't used to how easily blushes showed on its pale cheeks. So, what gave you the idea to start foraging like this? I was eating lunch one day. Cheese spread and crackers and pop. One Pepsi tasteless lunch, you see. And I start thinking about how I would never go hungry back home as a small boy. How even if I was home to eat me mother food, it always had some kind of fruit tree or something round the place. I start to remember Julie mango, how it's sweet, and tang and piwa that my mother would boil up in a big pot of salt water, and how my father always had his little kitchen garden growing dashin leaf and pigeon peas and yam and thing. And I say to myself, Johnny, ain't this country have plants and trees and fruit and thing too? The squirrels, them always looking fat and happy. They must be eating something. And the Indian people themselves too. They must be did eat something else besides corn before the white people come and take over the place. That same day, I find my ass in the library and I tell them I want to find out about plants that you could eat. Them sit me down with all kind of book and computer, and I come to find out it have plenty to eat right here in the city, growing wild by the roadside. Some of these books even had recipes in them, Doo-Doo. So I drag out all of Rita frying pan and cook spoon from the kitchen cupboard, and I teach myself to feed myself. Yes, he chuckled again. Now I does eat fresh mulberries in the summer. I does dig up chicory root to take the bitterness from my coffee. I even make rowan berry jam. All these things all around we for free, and people still starving we. You have to learn to make use of what you have. But I still think that the slingshot was a master stroke, though. Ain't nobody expect an old black man to be hunting with a slingshot down in the ravine. I was still chuckling as I left Mr. Morris's building later that evening. He'd loaded me down with a container full of stuffed rabbit and a bottle of crabapple preserves. I deactivated the screamer alarm on the car, and I was just about to open the door when I felt a hand sliding down the back of my thigh. Yeah, stay just like that. Ain't that pretty? We'll get to that later. Where's your money, sweetheart? In this purse here? The press of a smelly body pinned me over the hood. I tried to turn my head to scream, but he clamped a filthy hand across my face. I couldn't breathe. The bottle of preserves crashed to the ground. Broken glass sprayed my calf. Shit! What'd you do that for, stupid bitch? His hand tightened over my face. I couldn't breathe. In fury and terror, I bit down hard, felt my teeth meet the flesh in his palm. He swore, yanked his hand away, slammed a hard fist against my ear. Things started to go black, and I almost fell. I hung onto the car door, dragged myself to my feet, scrambled out of his reach. I didn't dare turn away to run. I backed away, screaming, "Get away from me! Get away!" He kept coming, and he was big and muscular and angry. Suddenly he jerked, yelled, slapped one hand to his shoulder. What the fuck? I could see wetness seeping through the shoulder of his grimy sweatshirt. Blood? He yelled again, clapped a hand to his knee. This time I had seen the missile whiz through the air to strike him. Yes! I crouched down to give Mr. Morris a clear shot. My teeth were bared in a fighter's grin. The mugger was still limping towards me, howling with rage. The next stone glanced by his head, leaving a deep gash on his temple. Behind him, I heard the sound of breaking glass as the stone crashed through the car window. He'd had enough. He ran, holding his injured leg. Standing in the middle of the street, I looked up to Mr. Morris's 6th-floor window. He was on the balcony, waving frantically at me. In the dark, I could just see the wire of a slingshot in his hand. He shouted, "Go stand in the entranceway, girl. I coming down." He disappeared inside, and I headed back toward the building. By the time I got there, I was weak-kneed and shaky. Reaction was settling in, and my head was spinning from the blow I'd taken. I didn't think I'd ever get the taste of that man's flesh out of my mouth. I leaned against the door inside, waiting for Mr. Morris. It wasn't long before he came bustling out of the elevator, let me inside, and sat me down on the couch in the lobby, fussing the whole time. Jesus Christ, child. It's a good thing I decided to watch from the balcony to make sure you reach the car safe. Lord, look what happened to you, eh? Just because you had the kindness to spend a little time with old man like me. I sorry, girl. I sorry, can't done. It's okay, Mr. Morris. It's not your fault. I'm all right. I'm just glad that you were watching. I was getting a little hysterical. I come to rescue you with my food bank freeze-dried turkey dinner, and you end up rescuing me instead. I have to ask you, though, Mr. Morris, how come every time you rescue a lady, you end up breaking her windows? That Sunday, I drove over to my parents' place for Thanksgiving dinner. I was wearing a beret cocked at a chic angle over the cauliflower ear that the mugger had given me. No sense panicking my mom and dad. I had gone to the emergency hospital on Friday night, and they disinfected and bandaged me. I was all right. In fact, I was so happy that 2 days later, I still felt giddy. So nice to know there wouldn't be photos of my dead body on the cover of tabloids that week. As I pulled up in the car, I could see my parents through the living room window, sitting and watching television. I went inside. Mom, Dad, happy Thanksgiving. I gave my mother a kiss, smiled at my dad. Cynthia, child, he said, I'm glad you reached. I could start making gravy now. Marvin, don't be so stupid, my mother scolded. You know she won't eat no gravy. She mind and she figure. It's okay, Mom. It's Thanksgiving, and I'm going to eat everything you put on my plate. If I get too fat, I'm just going to have to start walking to work. You've got to work with what you got after all. She looked surprised but didn't say anything. I poked around in the kitchen like I always did. Dad stood at the stove stirring the gravy. There was another saucepan on the stove with the remains of that morning's cocoa in it. It smelt wonderful. I reached around my father to turn on the burner under the cocoa. He frowned at me. It's cocoa tea, Sin. You don't drink that no more. I just want to finish what's left in the pot, Dad. I mean, you don't want it to go to waste, do you? And thus endeth the story. So that was A Habit of Waste by Nalo Hopkinson from her book Skinfolk. And that was quite a story. I did not see it going that way. I had no idea how it was going to go, to be perfectly honest. We start off with this weird fantasy tale, actual legit fantasy, no real horror. This weird fantasy tale about a woman who swaps out her body. And you gotta love the way that she looks with envy at what she just had. I think she said it had been 4 years since she switched out of that body. And, you know, her choice to switch into a white body notwithstanding, the way that she saw herself, you know, that old adage that the grass is always greener on the other side of the fence. But she saw herself, and she could finally, with someone else in possession of what used to be hers. She could finally see herself the way that she was. The glow of her skin, the sensuality of her shape, the way that other people looked at her, regarded her. Part of me wonders, was that really the characteristic of the body? Or did the inhabitant, whoever that new person might be, did that inhabitant bring something of their own glow that was reflected in the skin? The new inhabitant brings something of her own confidence, or his or her own confidence, because we don't really know who the new inhabitant is. Did they bring something of their own confidence to the walk? Was that walk always there? Did that skin always glow? I mean, it could be something as simple as the new inhabitant was just taking more time to exfoliate. But I like to believe, my interpretation of it is that the new resident in that body had a glow about them that was always theirs, and they brought it to whatever body they were in. And let's see, let's look at some of the comments. Terry says, I bet the inhabitant did, since she got the body she wanted and was rocking it with pride. And that makes sense. I can buy that. Let's look at some of your comments. So Kamisha said that this was a beautiful story. Terry said that she loved it. Gwen loved it. Erica feels like that was beautiful. I'm inclined to agree. L. Jack says he loved it too. That's what's up. Something for the fellas even. I love it. No, this was a pretty superb story. Sneakwa says that she understands Mr. Morris so deeply. Yeah, that wisdom, right? I got to tell you, the first time that I noticed decorative cabbage, what they call it, ornamental cabbage, was in front of a bank when I was living in Cincinnati, actually. And I walked by and I was like, why the hell is there purple cabbage here? Like, I thought it was a mistake. And then I noticed it was in even rows. And I was like, they legit planted cabbage. I mean, it looked nice. But why? Why was that there? And it was troubling to me because I thought of it the same way. I was like, that's legit fresh vegetables. And literally maybe 20 blocks south of where I was, I knew there was a neighborhood that there wasn't, like, the nearest grocery store was a cab ride, bike ride minimum. So it really troubled me to think about fresh produce being used as decoration. I get it. People do it. I understand that it's even grown, for that purpose. It's cultivated a certain way for that purpose, but it was still troubling to think about. But the wisdom of this man saying, you know what? These squirrels done found a way. These birds done found a way. Everybody else, all of God's creatures, is out here living their best life, eating, doing well. Why should I starve too? Erica Goodman says, I can recognize the fact that there was clearly a decision that she wanted to pass for white because she was embarrassed by her family, a bit like Imitation of Life. I hadn't really thought about that correlation, but yeah. And it's strange that she would be embarrassed by her family. I don't really know a lot about Canada, so I don't know how West Indian people are perceived, or people from the islands are perceived in Canada. I don't know how those particular isms play out. So there could be a lot more there that I'm just not aware of. I'm curious about it myself. But yeah, this was a fantastic story. I really enjoyed it. We are doing good on time, but I think it's about time for us to go ahead and get ready for the next story. So unless anybody's got any other additional comments, we will begin. Let me go ahead and find that page, though. I still have the markers in here from the previous stories that we read, Tan Tan and Dry Bone and Greedy Choke Puppy. And the energy of those stories is mad powerful. So it was, I had to keep, because I wanted to check it out again. Second story of the evening, and likely our final story based on the time, is Lillies-them A-blow. In 1971, the late Jamaican spiritual leader Imogene Elizabeth Kennedy, Miss Queenie, gave an interview. The words that Sammy hears are taken from Miss Queenie's description of how she came into her power. The sections in Miss Queenie's words are reprinted with the kind permission of Savakul magazine. Lilies. Nasty dead people flowers. Samantha held up a vase that she'd found outside her apartment door that morning. 7 long-stemmed white lilies wafted their funeral scent over her. A single twig from a cotton plant, budding with little white puffs, set off the arrangement. Who was the ras that would send a cotton plant to a black woman? Like them never hear of ancestral memory. The vase was beautiful, clear, round as a gourd, with smooth ridges that fluted up its sides. The solid weight of the glass spread a pleasant warmth through her hands. Someone had filled it with warm water to encourage the scented blooms to open wide. Not to her liking, but someone had taste. There was a plain florist shop card hanging from one stem. It read, "One day I remember, one day I find some lilies, and I plant the lilies them in a row, and one morning when I wake, all the lilies blow. 7 lilies and 7 of them blow." Samantha felt the skin at the back of her neck prickle, like a duppy walking on her grave. She stepped quickly back inside her apartment, locking the door and sliding the chain home. She took the vase into the small living room, shoved a bag of groceries aside to put the vase on the coffee table. She should unpack the bag soon. Hadn't she brought strawberries or something last night? The lilies nodded in the direction of her mother's intricately patched quilt hanging at a corner on the far wall. She really should straighten it, brush off the film of dust that clung to its top edge. Not that that would help the rest of the apartment much. A bra was draped on the bookshelf, one strap hooked over a hand-rolled beeswax candle in a cast-iron holder. Like a dingy cotton ball, a dust bunny circled in an unseen draft in the corner of her living room by the door. Last night's dinner plate sat atop the TV, a half-eaten carrot stick glued to its surface by a wet smear of congealing butter. Tucked under the plate, 3 gum sheets of scribbled notes gave Samantha a surge of guilt and panic. A chronological history of provincial government support of neighborhood centers in Ontario's north was little more than a title at this point, and it was due today. She went into the bathroom to commence the daily business of transforming herself into a semblance of a young career woman. She dressed and left for work, leaving the flowers pumping out their faint, sweet scent. "Hey, Sam." Grant's cheerful face peered around the wobbly gray room divider that separated his desk from Samantha's. He must have nicked himself shaving again. A pinch of bloody cotton clung to his chin. "How was your weekend?" "Could have been worse. Can't talk long, though. I've got a 5 p.m. deadline on this damned report. Why the hell does Barnes care if Asswipe County Community Center got a $2,500 government grant in 1968 to repair their roof, huh?" Grant chuckled. "Well, you know, what Barnes wants, she gets. Well, I better leave you to the joys of capital spending in our neighborhood centers." He ducked out of sight, and Samantha returned to pounding at her computer keyboard, peering irritably at the screen. Nasty smelling cologne Grant was wearing today, like rotting flowers. Samantha slipped the finished report under Barnes's door at 4:48, but still had to strike that administration budget and prepare the overheads for tomorrow's staff meeting on electronic access. Everyone would leave at 5, but she'd be working late again. She went back to her cubicle, sat down, hit a button on her keyboard to wake the terminal up. On the screen, she read, 7 lilies I plant, and the 7 of them blow, and I leave and go down in the gully bottom to go and pick some coconut. And when I go, I see a cotton tree, and I just fell right down the cotton tree root. This was too fucking bizarre. She was the only West Indian in the office. She'd only been away from her desk for a second. Who could have typed these words, and what the hell did they mean anyway? She deleted the document, switched her computer off, stood up, and grabbed a purse out of her desk drawer. Screw this. She was going home early tonight. The sea air managed to smell almost fresh in the blustery spring evening. Samantha decided to walk home, a nice half-hour stroll. She couldn't avoid the tourist trap of the busy Young Street strip, though. It was a Monday evening, but Young Street never closed. It was just as noisy as it would be on the weekend. 3 stories tall and painted bright blue, a record store brayed out the latest dance hits. A video arcade squatted beside the store, a cacophony of flashing lights and bells. In its dark interior, wild-eyed young men and women pounded on the levers on the video machines, feverishly jerking their bodies against the consoles with each hit, doing battle with the monsters. The photos plastering the facades of the strip clubs displayed impossibly thin, impossibly busty women. A Thai restaurant faced a Colombian coffee shop, which was flanked by a franchise burger place, which overpowered a minuscule West Indian roti shop, which, despite the competition, was jammed full of customers. That's about right. People on the streets moved very slowly, walking 3 or 4 abreast, gawking, dawdling. At the corner of Young and Jared paced a young, gangly white man with stringy brown hair and wild blue eyes. The hem of his white robe had a rim of mud and salt. A smattering of people were watching him, waiting to see what he would do. He put a megaphone to his mouth and continued his harangue. "And when the Lord comes, brothers and sisters, and he asks, what were your deeds on this earth, what will you speak? Will you be able to tell our Lord? In the night, in the cotton, come in like it hollow, and I inside there. And you have some grave around that cotton tree, right round it some tombs. But those is some whole time Africa, you understand? Have you accepted the Lord as your Savior in your hearts, brothers and sisters?" Samantha felt her entrails curl tighter into her gut, her scalp prickle with goose flesh. She couldn't have heard correctly. Looking back once over her shoulder at the Holy Roller, she hurried into the world's biggest bookstore, headed for the first quiet section. She paced up and down the rows, stopping here and there when a book caught her eye, paging through it half-heartedly before returning it to the shelf. Maybe he had been Jamaican, that man. The book drew her gaze by its sheer size. Too tall for the shelf, it had been put in at an angle. She eased the large, heavy volume down. It turned out to be a massive essay in photography of the various styles adornment of the African continent. Samantha eased the book open and ran her hand slowly down the full-page color photograph of a young Berber woman in desert blue. In a desert dress, a blue billowing robe, lacy black design painted on her bare feet and open palms. 5 or 6 stylized crosses around her neck, orange-sized balls of amber pinned into her hair. With her forefinger, Samantha traced the geometric outlines of the hand-beaten crosses, each one different. She turned to the back cover. It cost more than she made in a day's work. She made to return the book to its shelf, took it down again, walked over to the cash register. "On my credit card, please." She let herself into her apartment, kicked her boots off at the door, and went straight into the living room to throw herself onto the love seat. If anything, the flower arrangement on the coffee table looked more fresh than it had this morning. She could now see that the vase was not perfectly round, and that it was seamless, insisted here and there with tiny air bubbles. The vase was mouth-blown glass. The flowers had that graveside beauty, but the wonderfully imperfect vase was a treasure. Who would have sent her such a lovely gift? Her friend David? She called him, but he only said, "Not me, girl. You getting bouquets from a secret admirer? What's the card say? Tell. Some weird shit about lilies blooming. And it's written like, well, kind of like my grandparents talk." Maybe her grandparents had sent it. But her grandmother hated lilies too. Samantha called them just in case. No, not them either. After a guilty promise to call more often and a reassurance that she was dressing warmly as the days got colder, Samantha rang off, sat back on the couch, and opened her new purchase, and was lost. Dinner forgotten, she spent hours curled up on the couch, reading the big book she'd bought. The master jewelers of Benin had been carving tiny, intricate brass and gold figures through the lost wax method for centuries. Igbo men wear their wealth in the form of intricate beaded corsets. Fulani women endure the weight of huge brass anklets because they like the seductive way that it lends to the seductive sway that it lends to their hips. Fulani men dye their lips and put kohl around their flirty eyes, and wear their sparkly finery on festival days to attract mates. Samantha walked into her bedroom, still gazing at the open book. The sweet fragrance of the lilies scented the air right through the apartment. No matter what room she was in, she was aware of their presence. It was late. Samantha put the book down and went to bed. The clock radio blared its wake-up call. Samantha thumbed from alarm to a radio station and sat up in bed, eyes closed. In her half-awake state, it was a moment before her mind registered the tune coming from the radio. A cappella. A little girl's voice sang threadily off-key. Sammy planted a piece of corn in the gully. I don't know this song, so I'm just going to make it up. And he growed till he killed poor Sammy. Sammy dead, Sammy dead, Sammy dead, oi. Sammy dead, Sammy dead, Sammy dead, oi. Samantha threw the radio to the floor. It cracked apart, then went silent. Once her shaking hands managed to pick up the shards of plastic casing, Samantha headed for the garbage can in the kitchen. She froze in the living room. The lilies were bare stalks, dried petals scattered all over the room, as if they had been windblown. Like men's hair, withers clung to the cotton plant stick. The odor of water-rotted vegetation seeped into Samantha's nostrils. Your daddy's sorry he didn't get to see you before he leave. He fly to Ottawa this morning, some conference or something. How things at work, sweetheart? Samantha's mother fed layered squares of cloth and quilt batting under the sewing machine needle. Her sewing room took up half the basement, ceiling-high shelves of patterned cloth towering over a high-tech sewing machine encrusted with knobs, flashing lights, and diagrams. Samantha could remember any number of Sunday afternoons like this, herself and her mother cutting squares and triangles of fabric for quilts, chatting in the rhythms of her parents' birthplace that felt so easy in her mouth. Work okay, not too nice sometimes. Come weekend, I don't feel to do nothing but sleep, but at least I have a job, right? Mommy, you know that song, the one that go, Sammy dead, Sammy dead. I used to sing it to you when you were small. Her mother snapped the pressure foot of the sewing machine down to hold the quilt in place, stood up and arched her back to relieve the soreness. You want some pimento liquor? Your grandfather just bring me some of his latest batch. Samantha nodded. Her mother walked over to the wet bar on the other side of the room and lifted out the glass-cut decanter. Ruby liquid sloshed inside it. When she removed the stopper, a warm, spicy scent floated up from the bottle. Samantha's mother poured a measure of the liqueur into each of 2 brandy glasses. Sam accepted one, took a sip. The sweet, musky brew slid heavily down her throat, calming her. What that song about, Mummy? Where it come from? Is old Jamaican song. I'm not too certain what about. It come from slavery days. And Papa tell me he thinks Sammy was a slave who had to work so hard till it kill him. You should ask your grandfather. I teach maths, not history. Why you want to know? No reason. I just keep thinking about it a lot nowadays. Mrs. Lewis smiled. That song is so sad, but I loved it when I was a girl. His Papa used to sing it to me. He'd tell me when I have children I must sing it to them so they wouldn't forget. It make me think of home. When I get pregnant with you, I tell your father that we was going to name you Sam or Samantha. Great. Poor Sammy. Worked to death. Her mother's dinner had been wonderful as usual. Samantha had lingered late, nibbling at the leftovers and hoping that if she just waited another half hour, she'd have room for that last slice of fried plantain. Replete, she dozed in the subway ride home and didn't wake up until Dundas, 1 stop too far south. No matter, it wasn't a long walk. After 11 p.m., when she came up of the subway station and started walking in the direction of her building. Although never quite deserted, the downtown streets were still and quiet tonight. The windows of the roti shop were dark. As Samantha passed the fountain of Polytechnic, she had the odd sensation that cotton wool had been stuffed in her ears. So softly did the spray of water fall back into the pond. The hookers strutting in front of the all-night burger place seemed morose, their usual banter with each other and their customers lackluster. The long, empty stretch of pavement gleamed in the streetlight. It spooked her. Samantha decided to cut through the small park instead. It would be quicker, and it was brightly lit. She stepped onto the park grounds. There were unusual straggling knots of people gathered around the various benches under the trees, smoking up, cruising, or just hanging out. Sam started to feel a little better for having people around her. She kept going, left the section where the park benches were. In the dark, she could just make out the rows of brass triangles embedded along the perimeter of the park, plaques dedicated by people who had planted trees in memory of loved ones who had died. The trees danced and waved eerily at her. Samantha sped up. She rounded the big tree growing at the park's edge. She turned to check for traffic. Before crossing. She turned to check for traffic before crossing Carlton Street and tripped on the uneven ground. She tumbled, felt a sharp pain across the side of her skull as it cracked against the root of the tree. Then blackness. Well, those tombs around the cotton tree, and I inside the cotton tree lay down. And at nighttime I see the cotton tree light up with candles, and I restin' now. Put me hand this way and sleepin'. Hey girl, you all right? That was some fall you took. The chill of the icy earth made Samantha shiver. She opened her eyes to find two women bent over her. She was sitting with her back against the trunk of the tree that had tripped her. Stunned from the blow to her head, she stared bemusedly at the day-glow pink micro-mini of one of the women was wearing. Hot pink was not her savior's best color. I think I'm okay. Can you help me up? And I only hear a little voice come to me, and them talking to me, but those things is spirit talking to me, and them speaking to me now and say now, sure. They helped her to her feet, their 6-inch stilettos sinking into the thawing earth as they did so. The throbbing in Samantha's head was incredible, like someone pounding behind her eyes, trying to get out. Strangely, though, she could now hear very clearly, and the night had a pellucid clarity that let her see right to the other side of the park, even through the darkness. The gently swaying oaks and maples now seemed venerable, not threatening. Samantha took a few deep breaths. The headache began to lessen. The woman in the Dayglow Mini smelt like apple blossoms. I'm going to be all right. Thanks for helping me. Is a little, nice little child. And who going to get she right up now in the African world? Because you brains, you will take something. Therefore, we're going to teach you something. You sure? Maybe you should go to Emerge? Emerge. Oh, the emergency room. It's okay. If I start to feel sick, I will. Promise. But my home's right over there. Samantha crossed the street safely this time. 5 minutes later, she was in her apartment. The headache was completely gone, but she was still chilled and a little shaky. Well, the first thing that them teach me is swickety lango, which is sugar and water, see? And them teach me that. Swickety lango. Yeah, at that moment, Sammy knew what to do for her chills. She went to the kitchen, put the kettle on to boil, fetched the ginger root from the crisper of the fridge and the Demerara sugar from the cookie tin in the cupboard, along with the nutmeg. As she waited for the water to boil, she heaped the sticky brown crystals into the bottom of her largest mug, then grated ginger and nutmeg into it. She filled the mug with boiling water and took it into her bedroom, where she changed into an oversized t-shirt while the infusion steeped. Sitting up in bed, Samantha clutched the mug to her and inhaled the spicy steam. She looked through the pages of the book while she did, at gold and silver, brass and copper, beauty made by hands like her mother's quilt. like the empty vase that now sat at her coffee table. She wondered what she could fill it with. She sipped slowly at the tea until she had drunk it all, then put the mug on her bedside table and drifted off into peaceful sleep. Samantha strolled into work at 10 o'clock the next morning. It had taken the university temp agency long. It had taken longer at the university temp agency than she thought. She didn't worry about it because you brains. Camille smiled and shook her head as Samantha walked by the reception desk. Barnes has been asking for you. You were supposed to be in at 8:30. Yeah, I know. As she passed Grant's cubicle, he stuck his head out. No cotton this morning. Were you sick or something? He asked. No, I'm fine. She went into her cubicle, dumped her coat, turned on her computer, started typing. The counselor at the community college had said she stood a good chance of getting in. That never really was a very full course. We're going to teach you something, and then teach me my prayers, which is, Dear Ms. Barnes, it is with regret that I tender my resignation. She printed the letter, slid it under Barnes' door. From inside, she could hear the creak of her boss's chair as she got up to investigate. Samantha went back to her cubicle, fished the course calendar out of her purse, and started to leaf through it. 2 years to a certificate in goldsmithing, and she could take an elective in forging iron. And thus endeth the story. I'm pleased. Like, I'm actually really legit happy. That was a wonderful story. Hang on a second. It got dark in here, right? Something about that. That was a wonderful story. I think in particular, I really dug the fact that it did not go the way I thought it was going. And I don't know if you all had the same feeling. For those of you all who aren't familiar with the story, I don't know if you all had the same feeling. I thought for sure that this was all going to be a sign that she was going to die, and that when she hit her head on that root, I just knew that was it. Like, she was going to wake up dead. I was pleased to read the story as somewhat allegorical. By the time we got to the end, it became clear to me that these were all warnings, not that she was going to literally die, but that she wasn't living her life. She was walking around dead. That's how I took it. That's what the allegory was for me, that these were warning signs to her that she was living a life like she was dead. Because the real life that was within her, the truth of her, had not been being manifested. And so at the end, as she tendered her resignation, the way I took it was that she was choosing life, that she had had all the signs, even up to and all the way to including a near-death experience. And that was enough. That was enough to finally convince her, what the fuck is you doing? I can relate. I've had that. I've definitely had that. Whatever the course of the story, it was a courageous move. It's a bold move that not all of us can take. Not everybody built for that. Be able to say, you know what, I'm done. This gig, this job, I'll figure the rest out. I mean, studying goldsmithing, there's not necessarily a huge future in that, but there's a passion in it for her, and that made it worthwhile. Some beautiful, beautiful language in here. Tell me, if you will, some of the parts that spoke to you. We've got a little bit of time for comments. In both of these stories, did any of you have any favorite lines? Was there anything that really that caught your eye, or I guess caught your ear? What really spoke to you? Who all do I have left, y'all? Talk to me. I see I know Sanique was still here. She's giving me some feedback. Let's see. I've got, now I do not want to mess up this name. Your middle name is Tyra. Akanke, I'm so sorry. I'm almost certain I'm butchering this, but Tyra Washington caught. Let's go ahead and actually got hot pink was not her savior's best color. It's hilarious. What a thing to notice after falling, hitting your head. Yeah, no, that's true. At the same time, though, like I feel like because I've had, Lord help, I've had more than one near-death experience. I feel like right when you're coming out of that space, everything is in hyper detail. Akanke, okay, bet I got woohoo. Akanke told me that I got it, so I feel good. Yay. But I feel like everything is in hyper detail. I remember I was in a car accident coming off the Brooklyn Bridge, and when I came to, I remember the gap in the tooth of the EMT person who was helping me. And I remember one of the fire person was in a white shirt and had a gold button on his collar. It's a weird detail, but it was like, that was in my face. That was the thing that I saw. Like that was it. Iwan says, so was I. Okay, I'm guessing we're talking about near-death experiences. I guess, and that's where we're coming from. Yes, correct me if I'm wrong. What other thoughts? Does anybody have any other thoughts on this story? Am I alone in my enjoyment of it? I absolutely adored this story. I think, it's funny because I was all on Nalo Hopkins be writing scary stuff, and y'all don't want it. She's gonna be scary and be scary. And these are like two of the most benign stories. I mean, yeah, there was a little bit of a shade of something possibly eerie, but it was a beautiful story. I think of the two, my preference is for A Habit of Waste. That one grabbed me more. The characters were more interesting, and the magical realism at the top. Like, by the way, this is a universe where people switch bodies, and also slingshots. Like, I love stories that I think it takes such an amazing imagination to be able to juxtapose those kinds of things, to make them both occur in the same world, and they both have every reason to be there. They both feel like they absolutely, positively are supposed to be there. I like that. That speaks to me. I want to make sure that we put the information up on where you can get this book. But if we don't put it in this thread here in these comments, you can always check the Storytime with Julian page on Facebook. We will consistently post information about the book, about the title, about where you can find it. We will, as often as possible, try to post a link to a Black-owned bookstore because we support Black authors, and we support Black literature, and we support Black businesses, because at the end of the day, blackity black. Mimi says she liked the story. I'm glad to see that. And I know that a few of you were kind of lost. Oh, hey, look at that. Pew! Look at that. There's the information right there here on the screen for those of you all who like to do things with pen and paper. Those of you all who are more click fancy, you'll find this in the comments in Facebook. So go ahead and cop that book, because it's a darn good book. Listen, y'all, we are pretty close to time. We got a couple minutes. I just want to tell you how much. Hey, is that Nicole Tia on the Twitters? It's so good to see you. I love seeing my Twitter viewers. And speaking of, before we sign off, please, ma'am, please, sir, those of you all who follow the show regularly, get used to YouTube. Subscribe to YouTube, please. One, I really want to amp up the subscriptions on YouTube, because the more the subscriptions are amped up, the more cool things it'll let me do. I'm really holding back some content because I want to put it on YouTube, and I want y'all to be able to enjoy it and take advantage of it. So that's number one. Number two, there's going to be some exclusive stuff on there, but you're not going to be able to catch the repeats here on Facebook for very long anymore. I'm going to be taking those down, and they're going to go live on YouTube. And soon after that, they will go on to live on the website, because that's what I've been doing in the background while y'all haven't been paying attention. I've been low key building a website. There's so many changes and good things in store for Storytime with Julian. And I just hope that y'all continue to keep rocking with us and keep vibing with us and help us grow. If you want to support this work, you can always tip your griot. There are now 2 ways to tip. For those of y'all who are familiar with my Cash App, you can do $ or Cash App sign Julian Long, or you could also do Cash App Storytime with Julian, because this is for the show. What that'll help do is it helps pay for the subscriptions to these streaming services. It helps me buy more books. It helps me adjust the lighting, because this thing is way too bright and I still need to get a new lamp. It helps me get microphones, and we just build slowly. There's some real, listen, y'all. I know a thing and I can't tell you yet, but it's gonna be so cool. I'm really, really excited. So please, y'all just got to keep rocking with me. Keep rocking with us. Keep rocking with us. Keep rocking with us. I promise you, there's so much really very cool stuff coming around. It really is. So please check it out. What else can I tell you? To subscribe to the YouTube channel, you're going to have to type in Storytime with Julian and search for it. You know what we look like. Our branding is pretty tight. Our colors, my face. If you see those, that's us. And it's named Storytime with Julian. So there's that. Also, please, if you haven't already, also follow us on the Twitters. There's going to be micro content that comes out through Twitters, but really it's just, I want to build the community as much as possible so that we can draw more people in. And when I say draw more people, I'm really talking about the authors and the artists, and really just kind of expand what we're all exposed to. Like, this has become this wonderful ride, this wonderful journey of discovery. Terry Meredith is happy that she can read the book in print and see the challenging parts that pop out, and I dig that. Angela Lee Rains, thank you so much. That's really, really sweet of you to say. This platform really means everything to me, and I am truly, like, real talk. I know Tuesday night is not party night, but there's a lot that you guys could be doing instead of kicking it with me, and I'm really honored that you're here. Like, that means the world to me. So please follow us on YouTube. Subscribe to YouTube. Follow us on Twitter. And my commitment to you all is that I will continue to keep growing this platform, doing as much as I can to make this the best thing that it can be, to make this the best live literature read show out there. And I say that knowing good and daggone well that LeVar Burton is reading live right now, but keep making me do it. And I thank you. And Coach Umstead, as always, thank you for spending your time with me tonight. This has been Storytime with Julian. I will see you again on Thursday with some new stories. And just keep tuning in. Peace. This is the part where I end the show.